It's getting scary out there, isn't it? Please excuse me referring to some notes in today's video. I try as much as I can in these hopefully quite measured little chats that I have with you to speak, well, mostly without notes because I prefer it that way, to have an idea and expand it and discuss it. But I wanted to follow some guidance on this one so that I don't lose myself too much in it. So yes, it is getting a bit scary. The reason I mention that is during the course of the last month now that I've been sitting here and doing these talks instead of doing the other stuff that I used to do, people have been in touch. Obviously there's the comments, and thank you so much for the comments, but people have been in touch with me personally by email, and they've sent me links, they've told me things, they've made me aware of all sorts of stuff that they've discovered, things that they wanted to let me know what was going on. All sorts of things, from a very nice sounding and intelligent chap who I think lives in France. Not that that's got anything to do with it, but he was telling me how we've been lied to for generation after generation by the fact that the planet is not actually a sphere, but it's a flat plane. I think you know where I'm going with this. And that if you take a certain point and you look towards the horizon, what's deemed as the curvature of the Earth is not actually the curvature of the Earth. And he was very insistent, in a very intelligent and very polite manner, to try and convince me that this was so. Now, I'm relatively open-minded to all sorts of things, and I think you've got to open your mind, even to those things which you think inherently is wrong, just to at least listen to the other side, and I do try to do that. I have opinions, and some may think that I'm opinionated, but I do try to listen to the other side of the argument. So I engaged with this gentleman for a while, and I said, okay, why do you suppose that we have been lied to? And what is this flat Earth about? And I'm afraid all he said really, it was very mysterious, that it was an authority keeping us in the dark about the reason why we've been told it's a sphere. Never mind the fact that actually when you go up in an aeroplane and you look out the window, you sort of see it, but that doesn't really seem to hold any water. So I asked him, how flat is this Earth? And how far does it go? What happens when you get to the edge? No one's ever got to the edge and reported back. You know, these sort of fundamental things that would make it sound plausible if somebody had actually taken a photograph of it. And how deep is this? You know, is it like a giant piece of turf in space floating about? Is it floating in space at all? What about the planet? So many questions that you could ask. And so I engaged in some conversation about that. But the fact that I suppose it was all a bit mysterious why we've been lied to started to make me feel, well, one's got to have a bit more of a theory about this other than the fact that it's not a real thing. I've also been contacted by many people who, as I said before, who somehow have knowledge about what's going on, the secret societies, the cabals in this world, the puppet masters and all of this. And many of them are up to dubious practices, and I'm going to leave it there because some of the practices and the things that they're supposedly doing, I think if I mentioned them, YouTube would just shut me down. And it's fascinating and it's interesting that people are sharing this knowledge, and they're sending me links, and you go to links and there's all these various ideas or proof, in inverted comma, from people who've seen things or heard things or witnessed things, and it sounds incredibly scary and frightening. And I come back to that in a moment. You could go mad when you start looking at this stuff. I mean, I've sat there looking at this going, good God, really? Is this what's happening? Is this what it's all about? Blimey. And then I read or look at another thing and I think, oh, crikey, that's awful. how do we combat this? But the thing I worry about is, aren't we, in a way, and I say we, you know, the royal we, aren't we doing the same as the mainstream media? So, and I touched a bit on this in another video, that the mainstream media will, as we know, are biased, and they may well have things that they want to push, like with the pandemic that we went through. It was clear there that there was not a recognition of the other side of the science. And I mentioned that in my last video, that they wanted to push one important message, and nobody was allowed to speak about the other side of the argument. And we noticed this during Brexit. As Brexit went along in the UK and we wanted to get out of Europe, we could see that the mainstream media, and the BBC particularly, were extremely anti the idea of Brexit and didn't really want to represent it. And anybody who thought Brexit was an idea was basically told you was stupid. So we had that. So we know that the mainstream media's news outlets are very suspect and scary and frightening. But then you go to the alternative media, and in my mind, we're doing exactly the same. Instead of giving people hope and perhaps a more reasonable outlook, we end up with loads and loads of different videos in which they're just as frightening, if not more extreme. And you don't quite know what to believe and what not to believe. It's like being a rat in a maze. Which little avenue do you go down? Which rabbit hole do you explore? And as you get further and further down, it seems to get more more ridiculous in some ways. And you start to, you could just lose your mind with all of this because it seems so fanciful. Now, I'm not saying any of this isn't true. I'm not saying that, because as somebody with an open mind, it's not for me to say none of this. I'm not saying that we don't live on a flat earth or a sphere. I mean, I personally think that's not true, of course, but I'm open to the science. If someone proves it elsewhere, I'd look at it. So I'm not saying the other stuff isn't true by any means. But I think we've got to think about what is reasonable. Where is our reason in all of this? I'm somebody who likes to try and think logically. Now that may be that may be a mistake, thinking logically. And I think, well, okay, let's just, for the example, go along with these secret societies, these people who are trying to do all sorts of nasty things to the planet for their own ends and their own gains. And there's a number of questions one could ask, but my first question before anything else is, are they competent and could they do this? I mean, for example, anytime you see any corporate body or government try and do these things, very often you see how chaotic these people are. On paper and on websites, you see glossy magazines for a company. Now, I, as an entertainer in the past, have worked for different companies, and on the outside, everything looks marvellous. It's like the swan swimming across or gliding across a lake. You see it peaceful and serene, the publicity, the advertising, all of that, the media for the company looks fantastic. But once you're the other side of the glass, once you're through the door, you see the legs moving rapidly. You see the panic. You hear the crass comments to one another, the panic. We've got to get this done. It's all got to look right. Think of the old TV series In the Thick of It, in which it displayed the government on the one side giving the media bites all very smooth and all very confident, and then behind doors the swearing and the cursing and the cussing and all of that as they're desperately trying to do the chaotic atmosphere. I know councils struggle to get things done. The country struggles to get things done. There are always going to be, for example, whistleblowers who will be saying, hang on a minute, I just don't believe this is the right thing to do. There will be people who will have moral judgments about it. So I'm not quite sure how this would work. If you've got your cabal, and there they are, and you've got these McNasties in the world pulling the strings and doing these dubious practices that we're all told that they do, But they need a support mechanism because they're not doing the dirty work, are they? They have henchmen who do the dirty work. Who are these henchmen? How do you get a job as a henchman? I remember watching the film Austin Powers, and I thought that was very good because in some ways it made the ridiculousness of the James Bond sort of films where you have the Mr. Evil, the Dr. Evil character in his lair with all these henchmen in boiler suits, all the same, all doing the work. But who's employing them? Do people really work like that? Are there really all these henchmen? Are they all getting back pay? And are none of them having a sort of moral dilemma with themselves and thinking, oh, I don't know, depopulation of the earth, that doesn't sound like a really good thing. Maybe I might tell somebody about it. Do we really think that these people can actually get away with it? This is where I say about having a reasoned mind. And some of these things that you hear, some of these things about poisoning people and killing people off and depopulation, what's the point of it all? And the reason I say that, you know, people say, oh, well, there's 8 billion people in the world and there's too many people, so we need to reduce it. And the best thing to do is to do it without telling them, and we'll just, you know, inject them with something and all of that. But at the end of the day, these people in control, these supposed people in control, they all need stuff doing, don't they? Somebody's got to wipe their bums, somebody's got to clean their toilet, somebody's got to make paper for them to write or do drawing or whatever it is, someone's got to make their iPhones. They're going to need people. They're also going to need innovative people, people with new ideas. They're people who will design a sexier, more expensive, more audacious yacht, or a much nicer, more elite type of jet, private jet to go around in the world. They're going to need people. Now, those people come up through the ranks. You can't just go, well, we'll get rid of everybody and they'll get bored of the existing yachts. They're going to need engineers and people to reupholster it and to change things. I mean, they're going to need people. So I do find that a little strange. And if they wanted seriously to get rid of the population of the earth, why would they get rid of the more intelligent members, the people? And I don't mean this in a derogatory way. Please don't take this offensively. But why would you get rid of the people in the first world situations, people with intelligence who've gone to learning, they've gone to school, they've educated themselves, and they're in a civilized society, who are the innovative people, the people who are drawing up new ideas and thinking new schemes to make life good, not just for ordinary people, but also for the rich and the elites and all of that. Why would you try and depopulate those? Surely, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that this should be done, but would you not be looking at the third world countries and going, well, look, they're just subsistent farmers, or they're just doing their own thing, populating because they're poor and they don't have a lot. We could get rid of those. They would be the target, you would have thought. Although actually, I think personally that what we should be doing is raising everybody out of poverty so that everybody has a chance, so that people in the third world have a chance to be educated, to have some good things in life, to be able to be innovative and create a better lifestyle for themselves. And they're the people who would be of the future, just like anybody else in the world. That's my own personal view. So I don't understand why they would do that. They ought to, of course, have the same rights of us. So I just wonder, finishing off now, are we not falling into the trap? And I say we, I mean the people who are supplying these ideas. Are we not falling into the trap in which we're letting the pendulum of fear swing the opposite way? We may be frightened by mainstream media and some politicians and even the people at the World Economic Forum with some of their ideas. But as I said before, there's more of us than there are of them. And if at the end of the day we don't want these things, we should be able to stand up and say, no, we don't want them. Are we putting more power into their pockets by being frightened of it and coming up with all these strange ideas and thoughts about what they might be doing? I mean, as I say, I don't know that they're not doing these things, and I'm not, because I'm not closing any of the argument down. But if we give them too much, if we give ourselves too much belief that there are all these weird and nasty things, are we not frightened that we're just going out there looking for doom and gloom all the time, instead of looking for actually a positive future, a bright future, and something that we can actually look forward to? After all, half the time, I think much of what we see in the world is not so much some secret society trying to manipulate us, but actually just a natural process of disorganized chaos. But I'd be interested in your thoughts on that theory. And I know you're all going to say I'm completely wrong, but there you are.